Friday's Times now, and we are fortunate to have someone with us who is uniquely placed to speak about this one. So the floor is yours, Simon.
Well, the headline is Bar Chiefs in Free Speech Dispute. And obviously, when I read that, I thought it was two publicans having a bash up on the pavement. However, what this is about, you may well have followed this tribunal. There is a barrister called Alison Bailey who works for chambers called Garden Court Chambers. She is what they call a gender-critical person. She believes that people cannot change their biological sex. She has tweeted and been public in her opinions about this. Garden Court Chambers is a very radical chambers and has a very close relationship with Stonewall. And Stonewall, the head of trans inclusion at Stonewall, wrote an email to Garden Court Chambers basically telling them that it would damage their relationship with Stonewall if they didn't do something about Alison Bailey. Alison Bailey then claims that the result of that was that she started to lose fees. So that's what the dispute is about.
Can I just ask you?
Yes.
When she was brought into whatever the correct term is, hired within the Garden Court Chambers, were they aware that she had views which were...
I think it all predates that. Alison Bailey seems to have been a barrister for a long while. I mean, she is a radical woman. She's a black lesbian, etc. And, you know, but she disagrees on this one particular issue that she thinks sex is immutable. But the point is that Stonewall, her argument is the allegations that Stonewall effectively threatened Garden Court Chambers to do something about her, and the result was she lost income. That's the allegation. That's what the case is trying to prove. But this particular story is that in the pursuit of these, when she put these tweets out, she sought some advice from the Bar Ethics Committee, the vice chair of which was a QC called Catherine McGarhy. No relationship to Mick, as far as we know. She then gave evidence in this tribunal. Now, she gave evidence about a particular thing that Alison Bailey had tweeted about called the cotton ceiling. This refers, as you might think, to knickers. This is an allegory, or an analogy to the the glass ceiling. And it is this idea that these workshops are run by this Canadian person who is called Morgan Page, a trans woman, about how trans women can strategise to have sexual relationships with lesbians. Alison Bailey alleges that this is effectively coercion. This woman...
And when you're saying trans women, you're saying who's still male-bodied?
Yes.
Yeah.
And not, and whatever.
Right.
But Catherine McGarhy argued in the tribunal, no, this was about bringing lesbians and trans women together. And it was similar to what happened after the end of apartheid in Nelson Mandela's South Africa. So effectively, a trans woman trying to sleep with a lesbian when they're male-bodied is actually the same as Desmond Tutu setting up the Truth and Reconciliation
And the cotton
Commission.
ceiling, that's a reference to a gusset, essentially.
The cotton ceiling is essentially, it's a ceiling through which you wish to pass.
I mean, that's horrific, and that's the term they've chosen to use.
More of a wall, surely. Well, it depends on angle. Anyway, sorry, carry on.
I do find that sort of analogy absolutely extraordinary. And I'm somebody who's been involved in lesbian and gay rights, since I was 17. I'm 65. I'm 65, Simon. 65.
All this is kind of your fault, isn't it, Simon?
Yeah.
You started all this.
I did. You're absolutely right.
Slippery slope.
To be fair, what we did was we started off in a car, the brakes of which started to fail, and as we went down the hill, it veered off.
And now it's on fire in a ditch.
In a slip road.
Yeah. It's Douglas Murray's analogy, isn't it? The train just about to pull into the station of equal rights, and suddenly somebody decides to accelerate back out.
The one thing that did make me chuckle about this, though, is at the end of the story, it just says that the guidance from the Bar Standards Board to barristers is to avoid getting drawn into heated debates or arguments. You'd think that's what they did.
Right.
As a professional.
Do you have a view on this, Nick? I mean,
no, other than... Simon's given such a good summary. Other than it was absolutely crazy what the person said about Nelson Mandela and this whole idea that lesbians' refusal to have sex with trans women is based on prejudice and bigotry rather than same-sex attraction. That was the claim, which is just absurd. I mean... basically, I think beauty is pretty much objective, but also attraction is pretty much locked in, isn't it? It's not really voluntary.
I think sexual orientation is... Look, I remember a journalist saying to me when all this stuff started out, well, what would you do, if you... I mean, I'm married, as it happened, but what, if I wasn't and I was out in the dating, what would you do, if you fancied a guy and you talked to him and you got home and it turned out, in fact, this was a trans man, and in fact, this person had a vagina rather than a penis. And I said, well, I'd offer them tea. We'd go back, we'd go Boy George.
But I suppose, just to be sort of po-faced about it, you're not under threat in that situation, are you? You can make a joke about it, but a woman who goes back with what she thinks is another woman and he turns out to have a penis.
There's no...
There's a bit of a different imbalance.
There is a different imbalance, and I think that is an issue, a huge issue for women, is the notion of male-bodiedness. And that was one of the peculiar things that the head of trans inclusion, who's this person called Corinne Medcalf, this is the head of trans inclusion at Stonewall, said at one stage during their evidence, bodies are not inherently male or female, they are just bodies.
Yeah.
And I think what that doesn't understand is, quite apart from biological sex, it doesn't understand why it is that women have some kind of fear about the male presence. And the great Julie Bindel, who I love, who's a feminist writer, says this thing when men say, oh, well, not all men are rapists. And Julie says, yeah, but our problem is we don't know if it's you or not.
Yeah. Well, and it sounds like this Morgan person is essentially teaching you the skills that you'll need to avoid having to resort to that, virtually.
That's what it feels. That's what it seems and looks like. The argument from the others is that it's not. It's merely an attempt to create a great fuzzy, warm, cuddly reconciliation.
Well, the story continues.